Hi everyone, my name is Laura Ingram. Some people probably know me a little bit better as JWT Girl. It's been a while since I've done anything on the internet. I do have my blog, The Mouthful, but I have not posted on there in quite a bit, and I have this YouTube channel, which some I think may know me a little bit better as JWT Girl. But even then, it's been dormant for a long time, and I haven't really said much of anything. So there's been a lot going on in the world, and I just haven't really known what to say. At the same time, I've mostly been focusing on just living my life, focusing on my professional life and being a mom to my 2 kids and just living, so but here I am. I'm back, and I'm going to talk for a little bit about some of the things that I've thought about and that mean something to me. And I wanted to start talking about basically something that I used to always speak about, and that was always a big topic for me, which is my transition and the transgender community. And it's not something that I've talked about for a long time. And now I think it's with kind of the politics of the world lately, and with how things are, like, I feel like it's probably a good idea to talk about some of these things. And so in terms of being transgender, in terms of needs and awareness, I just want to say I think all along we've been using the wrong terminology. Now, I know there's also a big schism between, medically transitioning and non-transitioners. But I think that this still applies a lot. It will apply more to those who medically transition. But I think that when we're honest with ourselves, that if you are going through anything, any type of medical situation, that tends to take precedence to anything that you're doing that's elective. And those that medically transition are doing it because it's a way to solve a health problem for them. It's a medical thing. So coming from that perspective, I think that it's important to think about the terminology that we've been using for years. And there's always been this debate that's been raging about whether the goal of this is authenticity or if it's passability. And to be honest, after thinking a lot about it and after my experiences transitioning and just living, I don't think it's either. I think it's about relatability. From the decision to transition and onward, we relate more to certain experiences. Beforehand, for years even, we want to feel others relate to us. For us, it's always been gender which seems to separate us, at least for a lot of us. It has always been a plethora of experiences, hammering home that same truth for years and years, that ends with no other choice left but to change how we are looked at as soon as we step into a space. And that's where that decision comes from. We know that as soon as we walk through a door, We are associated with things we shouldn't be associated with. Call it point A. And then not associated with things that would make us more comfortable. Point B. And our discomfort from the outset keeps us from changing any of those impressions, which keep coming and making us again and again more uncomfortable. There is basically too far to travel at that point. After all this experiencing, after making that first impression and not standing up to it, there's too far to travel at that point from point A to point B. And in between, all of our relatability gets jumbled up. Between us standing up for our own authenticity and becoming more relatable, to becoming more and more grounded in our own unrelatability. It's all confused. And the very attempts to try and relate at that point are thrown out the window. And I think that's where a lot of us are coming from. Maybe not all of us, but I think it speaks to a larger voice than what maybe a lot of these ideas had been speaking to before. And so we know we need to change at that point. We figure out that we need to change each meeting. Every first impression miles from that mark. And then every interaction after that first impression changes, if you can change that. And that's the feeling. That is the strong feeling, which over time turns into despair when we realize that it's not happening, that it seems impossible. And then eventually into dysphoria. Having transitioned and living mostly in stealth, that strong feeling I have had, what I had before all of this, before it all began, has also been my experience. And it took some time, and life isn't perfect, but at least I'm now viewed exactly how I always related to. And that was always my desire. And from what I see from others, it's actually their desire too. So not only do I relate myself and my body to me, but others are then able to relate to me in the way that I want them to from that very first impression. So from what I see, like I said, that's everyone's desire, to be more relatable. Think about that. It's what anyone wants, really. Although maybe others can't relate to feeling that dysphoria and need to transition, the desire to be in an environment or a situation that can make your mindset more relatable to others should be. Everyone should be able to understand that. And what is a body but an environment for your mind, your consciousness to live in? To become more relatable should be something anyone can understand. It's not about passing some test for validation or being fist in the air, fighting for your individuality and rights. Because when you think about it, both those things are relatable to people. Everyone knows what it's like to have or to want a strong sense of self. And everyone knows what it's like to follow or to be a part of a group and feel both needed and needing, both to be a person, but also to be part of a whole. Both of these desires require being authentically yourself, as well as meeting other people's standards. So it's not about passing. Although, yeah, it is. And no, it's not about authenticity. Although, yeah, it is. It's about relatability. And decades of transgender community discussions and psychological studies, and personally, I think I've summarized it better here than any of those long-winded explanations these groups have been talking about for ages. And I've been both an avid and vocal part of that community in the past, as well as a stealth, ready-to-please heteronormative conformist, trying to avoid political discussion and drama. Both times, both experiences, was just about living a life. And there has been bad and good about both of these experiences. But it's the good, everything that lines up, that causes me to think and to talk about all of this. Gender dysphoria comes from a natural desire to be relatable. But where, historically and dependably, your gender has made that impossible. It's why after transitioning, so much shock and demand comes. Political attempts to compel people to integrate bathrooms and speech, to accommodate and make the culture more gender diverse. It is also why some trans people go completely stealth, if they can, and hide their transgender history from prospective partners. It's all part of that desire to relate, not for total unabashed authenticity, and not to pass some unspoken test of femininity or masculinity and hit every single benchmark. No. For transgender people, for most decisions anyone makes, which carry any social impact, the hope is for you to relate to me, and that I relate to you, and that we relate to each other and everyone. It's all any of us want. It's all any of it is about. And so I think that that is a perspective that's not really thought about. And I feel that with some of the discussion in the community, there has become, and of course, no community, unless it's going to be a cult, is going to be a perfect, completely agreeable community. But I think that there has been this split, this fundamental split in how we perceive things. And I think that this kind of brings it all together, this perspective. I think that it really will speak to a lot of people to really consider this and think, how it applies to not just transgender people, but to everyone, because everyone can deal with relatability. And maybe people can deal with relatability between others, but people have a hard time understanding relatability within the self, that you don't relate to yourself, and thus, if you can't do that, how do you relate to others until you find a way to relate to the self? So that's what transitioning is about. That's what being transgender is about to me. I would love to hear all the different opinions, but I do think, and I would love, I'm hoping that this speaks to a lot of people, and I would love to know if it does or if it doesn't. And thank you for listening. This is going to be my first podcast. I know that the quality is not great. The video quality is not great, but I wanted to go ahead and get this out and see how this went across. And I hope everyone is doing well. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being around and existing. I love you all. Thank you for subscribing, and I will catch you later.